Coming up on Tech News today, Sony's in the red, Google's got a bouncer, the Facebook fallout, and AMD's new strategy, plus more.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
Bandwidth for Tech News Today is provided by Cachefly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Tech News Today for Thursday, February 2nd, 2012. Tech News Today is brought to you by GoToMeeting. Collaborate face-to-face remotely with GoToMeeting with HD Faces. For your free 30-day trial, visit GoToMeeting.com, promo code TNT. Welcome to Tech News Today. I'm Iyaz Akhtar.
I'm Sarah Lane.
And I'm Jason Howell.
This is the show where we kick around the tech news of the day along with you and try to make sense of it all. But first, we take the tech news and we make it like a ball so it's easier to kick. That's a pre-show. But anyway, we're joined in studio by a number of guests. We have MG Siegler, who was just on iPad today. MG,
Yes.
how are you doing?
Thanks for having me.
And we have Father Robert. And if you might recognize him from our listener co-hosted episode. How are you?
I'm just fine. Great to be back in California. Oof.
Great to have you guys.
We actually met up for a couple seconds at CES while we were on the floor. So it's good to see you in person. And so this is the first time I'm doing this, so let's see how this goes.
It's going great so far, Iyaz. We're going to have a great show.
You got this, Iyaz.
I got this.
You got this.
Thank you. All right, so let's hit the top stories. It's Groundhog's Day, so you're going to hear some of the same stuff from yesterday. So Sony.
Oh, boy.
Sony went ahead and reported their financials, and it was not a good quarter. They had a quarterly loss of $2.1 billion. They were dragged down by losses in its television business and the impact of the strong yen on its European operations. And this will likely mark Sony's fourth consecutive year in the red. Sony forecasted a loss of $2.9 billion for the full fiscal year. Now, in November, they had predicted only a loss of $1.18 billion. So that's a big jump. The losses come partly from selling off its half of a joint venture with Samsung to make LCD panels, and also from Sony's purchase, where they bought out Ericsson from the Sony-Ericsson joint venture. Howard Stringer was in a press conference today, and he was less than pleasant, I guess. Quote, "It would be nice if there were no earthquakes, no floods, no hackers, no anything, but on our own skills, we can get the company back to the targets we've already issued," because he was asked about his legacy. And then he did say, when we do come back, I'll come back to this press conference and address one or two of you reporters again, because he'll be replaced by Kazurai on April 1st as CEO and president. Some nice words by Stringer.
Well, okay, so Howard Stringer he's on his way out. He's 70 years old. It's like he's been working there for a while. He's probably kind of relieved not to have to bear the burden of Sony anymore. That said, last year was like the worst year for Sony in so many ways. There were natural disasters, both inside Japan. I mean, that wasn't even a year ago that the earthquake and tsunami happened in Japan. Then there were the floods in Thailand. That impacted a lot of the supply chain. Then there was Sony's outage in the middle of last year, which was... It was a really bad situation, but you have to at least assume, by giving Sony the benefit of the doubt, that it was a fluke issue, and they've patched their network to the point where this sort of thing isn't going to happen again. The Ericsson-Sony breakup, that's a one-time thing too. That was a big loss for them, but it was something that they did willingly. So some of this stuff, I have to kind of say, listen, Howard Stringer, it's true. A lot of the stuff was out of your control. Maybe Sony didn't handle everything the way that it should have, but it wasn't as if he just made bad decision after bad decision. A lot of it was cleanup control.
It sounds like he could make a better decision as to his words, what he chose there. He didn't have to. He could just say, yes, a lot of this was out of our control.
Well, I think what he's doing is he's pumping up Harai, right? He's saying, when we come back, then you guys are going to see that my successor has turned this company around. I don't know if it sounds so antagonistic.
He's speaking out of frustration. And I know what that feels like, to be in charge of something and then have it fall apart.
Right.
And people are yelling at you because they want someone to blame. And yeah, there were a lot of things that were beyond his control, but what was within his control was to make some smart decisions over his tenure. And I don't think we've seen that. I mean, Sony, it used to be the premier name, and that has been declining over the last 2 decades. And a lot of that happened on his watch. So it wasn't that he made bad decisions. It was, what good decisions did you make to try to reverse that trend?
Yeah, and he's an interesting guy
in and of himself, because he's a British gentleman who's running a Japanese company, which was pretty controversial at the time when it happened. It has been controversial since then. Now they're going back to a Japanese CEO, but I don't know. To me, like, when I read things like this from him, he's just like, he's making a lot of excuses, and some of them are, of course, valid excuses, like the earthquake and tsunami stuff, of course. But Sony really hasn't done anything interesting in a long time. And, since, obviously they had the PlayStation, which did very well, but they really dropped the ball with the PlayStation 3. PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2 did very well, but PlayStation 3 totally dropped the ball. And beyond that, I mean, yeah, they were the leader in televisions. Now they're no longer the leader in televisions. They obviously had the Walkman, which was a huge cultural impact before anyone else, and they just completely missed the MP3 revolution. They were trying to, putz around doing their own
8-track.
8-track, right, 8-track 3 stuff. And, they've been trying to push their own proprietary means. They had mini discs, and they were doing other things for a while. And they just bet wrong time and time again, and that's what we're seeing now, $2 billion losses from the company.
Well, what about the Vita? The Vita is selling it's not a runaway hit. I haven't been able to play around with it, obviously, but it's not some sort of a slam dunk that's going to save the company either.
Well, that's more successful than their whole tablets idea. They have the one that folds together. There's the S1 as well. Is it S1 and S2, or is it the S and the P? Something like that. See, they're really memorable names. Because if I can't bring them up, that's good. I'm just thinking that's the Vita is really the close thing they have to the kind of that second screen or the third screen, right? You have your television from Sony. You have your Vita, which controls your PS3. They're kind of holding on for hope, it looks like.
But even that it's not really imaginative. They essentially just up the specs on something that they already had. They need to be looking for that real second or third screen, and they're just not doing it.
Well, and they're buying out Ericsson now, right, to be able to try and bet a lot on mobile, since they've really fallen far behind there as well. And is it too late to make inroads at that market? I assume they'll have a bunch of Android phones coming out next year that will be similar to every other Android phone out there. I don't know that that's really the answer either.
Speaking of Android, we got some changes to the Android market. Google is now introducing the Bouncer. Now, here's Google's official blog post. They explain, once an application is uploaded, the service immediately starts analyzing it for known malware, spyware, and Trojans. So now Google's going to be vetting their apps. It also looks for behaviors that indicate an application might be misbehaving, and compares it against previously analyzed apps to detect possible red flags. Google actually runs every application on Google's cloud infrastructure to simulate how it will run on an Android device to look for hidden malicious behavior. The quote to CNET from Hiroshi Lockheimer, VP of Engineering of the Android team, was, "It won't get uploaded at all if it is an instance of known malware." So now what we have is an Android market that's not necessarily being curated. It has a bouncer. So you're going to the Android market club and you want to come in and you're like, hey, I have an app. No, you might not be able to do that.
Well, it's an automated bouncer, though. So how well programmed is this bouncer? Because if somebody can write code to get around it, then I'm not saying that that's what people are going to do, but if they can, they will. I don't know. I guess I just have to see it in action to know that if it's really going to be weeding out a bunch of junk.
Are you expecting there to be a bunch of false positives for a bunch of apps that we're going to see a bunch of people being very angry about
either
this?
False positives, maybe so, or apps that are getting through anyway because they're written cleverly enough so that they're not getting flagged.
Yeah, it does sound like part of this is that they're recognizing what's been done before and factoring that into the bouncer's algorithm. But I don't know if that's the entire strategy here, or whether it's actually smart enough to really kind of pick apart the code and detect new ways that malware can seep into these apps.
So I guess the question is, when does Google snatch up one of these security firms? They're going to pick up Symantec or AVG,
but to help them in this.
Let's start that rumor now.
Yeah, right.
You're here first.
But something that this does change. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of Android loyalists and diehard fans who are going to say, "Wait a minute, are we starting down the slippery slope? You're checking them now for malware. Are you going to start checking them for content? Are you going to start checking them for decency?" The whole idea was Google didn't want to be iTunes. They didn't want to be the App Store. They wanted to say, look, you can load anything you want. It's your device. So does this validate Apple's approach, or are they now saying, look, we think we can get some of the security and assurance of the iTunes Store without getting rid of our culture of openness?
Well, yeah, and along those lines, I just wonder, why weren't they doing this 2 years ago?
Yeah, no kidding.
3 years ago? it just seems like a obvious thing to do, and it's a good move, and they should be doing it. But yeah, I mean, it's basically seems like they wanted to keep it open as long as possible and make it seem like it was as seamless as could be to actually submit and get an app approved. But now they're having problems which many people predicted they would have if they grew to the certain size which they've gotten to. So this is an obvious thing. I'm surprised they haven't been doing this for 3 years.
Well, I think back in the early days of Android, there was sort of a utopian, it's going to be, any app that people can create. We're not going to police this. It's not going to be a closed down system. There were all of these things about Android that, as it's grown, just cannot be. You can't have an app store with thousands of apps that people don't trust because they're so filled with malware and crappy programs that turn people away from the operating system. And the people behind Android know that. So they have to start implementing these sorts of things. I think it's just, you don't always see that when you're growing until you're too big, and then you've run into problems.
The other thing, there's been alternative app stores for Android, and I think Amazon was one of those vetting things. It's like, you have to go through our app store. If you get apps through our store, it's safe. Maybe they're feeling some of the competition out there. There's other places.
And Amazon played that up. Amazon did their earnings, yesterday or 2 days ago, whatever it was, and they played up the fact how quickly their own app store is growing, which is, there was a lot of questions of that to begin with because it was so highly vetted, much like the Apple App Store. And could that work for the Android, marketplace? And it turns out that it has worked, at least according to Amazon themselves. And of course, there's all those devices out there now, and people are getting those apps. So I'm sure there are some people who really appreciate the much more curated nature and having not only the security but the quality of the apps up to a certain standard.
I think this is going to be a lot of fun for app developers just to see what they can get by. Yeah. I mean, like when the TSA did a bunch of things, they're like, how can I get this by? Can I get this pen through? Sure, I can. What other weird things are people going to try just for the sake of trying it? Because somebody's going to try.
And people have been doing that with Apple for a long time, obviously, of course, and plenty of weird things have gotten through. Many tethering apps.
There's a flashlight that has a tethering app.
Think back to all the stories about, well, why did this app make it through to the iTunes Store and this didn't? It's going to happen again now for the Google Store.
And have there been false positives with the Apple App Store as well? Because I really do think that's a really good point. If this is fully automated, you're going to see false positive at some point, and that's going to be kind of a big deal. It's like, why is my app not allowed? It doesn't have any of this of any sort. But
there definitely have been false positives with
But the automated aspect makes it a lot more fun because Google can point to the algorithm being correct. We can fix that eventually versus the Apple. Yeah. We're going to be completely capricious. We don't know.
We just don't like this. This icon's ugly.
You wrote a bad thing about Apple once. We will never accept your app.
On to more mobile stuff. Windows Phone 8 apparently detailed from Pocket now. They got their hands on some details about Windows Phone 8, codename Apollo, if you've heard that nickname. And they have all the information from a video hosted by Senior VP and Windows Phone Manager Joe Belfiore. Apparently this video was intended for partners of Nokia. You can see a screenshot there. That obviously shows that he had a video.
That could really come from
Pocket
anywhere.
now did not publish the video, so we don't know how accurate these are, but let's go ahead and tell you what we know. Apollo will add support for multi-core processors, new screen reses, so a total of 4 screen resolutions, NFC, and removable micro SD card storage. Sounds like it's catching up to Android right there. That's all of that. Windows Phone 8 and Windows 8, the desktop and tablet operating system, will share a kernel, networking stacks, security, and multimedia support. Now, this is pretty huge. That means that developers will be able to reuse most of their code to run Windows Phone apps on Windows 8 and vice versa. So that's really interesting. And some minor points. Zune, the desktop software, is saying the long goodbye. You no longer will need that on Windows to actually access your media off your Windows Phone. And there's a whole lot more applications. There's going to be native code support, which means you can port your iOS and Android apps right to Windows. Windows Phone, a lot easier. Windows Phone 8 is also adding security, some BitLocker encryption, the same 128-bit full disk encryption found on Microsoft's desktop platforms. Paul TWiT, actually, we were on Windows Weekly. He was just hoping this thing broke, so now he could actually confirm some of it, and he confirmed most of this. And also included, Paul TWiT included that the Skype app will still be a separate app, will not be integrated into the next version of Windows Phone 8. That's a whole lot of Windows Phone 8 details that have been out there. I mean, the most important thing, Windows Phone 8 and Windows 8 working together seems like a good approach.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Windows Phone needs something to pretty much everyone agrees that it's a good operating system. It just hasn't had the ability to take off in the same way that iOS and Android has, and they needed something because they were so late to the game. And maybe this is the integration. You know, a lot of people have talked about the Xbox integration being a potential thing, but this is, you know, a much bigger potential crowd even than Xbox. So if they can do that right, that's interesting, especially from the developer side of things. If they can start reusing code from Windows 8 applications, which is you know, we'll see what that actually means. Of course, Windows 8, you know, there's all this talk that they're going to have their own app store now, like the Mac App Store in OS 10. And so will those apps be traditional Windows apps? Will they be a little bit different? Will they be built from the ground up from scratch? And so will those be able to be ported over easily to Windows Phone 8? I mean, there's still, I'm sure, a lot of questions about this, but it's promising.
Right. Yeah, the thing for me is Windows Phone is a nice OS. It's beautiful. It's smooth. It's fast. But you can't just have a nice OS because you've got two major competitors in the market that have a huge head start. So Microsoft needs to do something different. I think this is their attempt to do something different. You know, you can do the monkey boy dance again and do the whole developers thing. Yeah, it's about developers. If they can take that shortcut and say, look, if you're developing for Windows 8, if you're developing for these other platforms, you can cross-compile. That gives them a leg up. And that's something that only Windows can do, only Microsoft.
Definitely seems like something they kind of have to do. I mean, Windows Phone is trying to get a nice, significant part of the market, although people are worried. If you're worried that the Windows Phone apps will no longer work on the new version of Windows Phone 8, don't worry about that. Apparently, it's supposed to be some compatibility there, so you're not going to throw out all 40,000 or 50,000 apps that are already available in the Windows market. So I'm thinking what...
But to me, that sounds like we're getting in another slippery slope here, which, you know, Windows has had for a long time, which is backwards compatibility issues, because that just turns all of a sudden a nice, sleek OS into a potential bloated piece of not so sleek OS, and we'll see. You know, maybe that won't be true here. Maybe they've obviously been trying to think that through. But you know, if they have to keep doing this, hopefully it's a one-time thing, and they only have to do this change, you know, one time, and then have backwards compatibility.
I'd imagine in the Windows Store you're going to see like a little plus, kind of like you see with the Apple iOS thing, where it's like, oh, this application also has a companion app for your phone, but it's reusing a lot of the code, so you have that same interface on different systems. Because sometimes when you move from your mobile device to your desktop and you find an incompatibility in its feature set, it's just kind of irritating.
Yeah.
Well, who else is going to miss Zune desktop integration?
Yeah. So is this the final nail in the Zune coffin? Is there's still like the Zune services?
Every time we talk about and Zune is going away, I think, all right, then that's the end of Zune. But there's always some other Zune related thing. Now Zune desktop integration is going away. There is a zombie Zune around somewhere. Well, the fact
there's no desktop. It's basically, if Apple ripped out iTunes and they went back to iSync,
right? So
this would be Active Sync. This is basically remove this piece of software that not a lot of people are fond of, and just let the operating system handle it on its own. So the Zune, you guys are right, zombie Zune. You know, it's under there. It's just
that'd be a zombie.
The zombie apocalypse.
Yeah, it's not. Oh boy. Let's thank a sponsor. Let's thank GoToMeeting. Tech News Today is brought to you by GoToMeeting. You know, nothing's better than having a face-to-face meeting. You can really understand if the other person's understanding what you're saying, because you can look them in the eyes and you can see if they're bewildered or not. And the thing is, people are far apart these days. You know, we work online. You want to have a meeting, but you know you can't get everybody in a room. What do? You could try out GoToMeeting with HD Faces by our friends at Citrix. So here's how it works. All you need is a webcam to join a group and start collaborating. HD video quality. So it's better than that little cruddy 360 by 240 you're going to be seeing. You can work on documents in real time. Actually looks clean and clear. It's like you're all in the same room. But you know, maybe you came back from CES and you had the plague and you don't want to share that kind of thing and you want to keep your friends safe. Use GoToMeeting. Okay, you can see their looks, and then you could also maybe black out your video when you have to sneeze off camera. Again, it's like you're in the same room. You can just get right back to work very easily. Start hosting your own face-to-face online meetings today with GoToMeeting, and you guys can try out free for 30 days. Visit GoToMeeting.com, click the Try It Free button, and use the promo code TNT. Again, visit GoToMeeting.com, click the Try It Free button, and use the promo code TNT. And we thank them for their support of Tech News Today. So we've got some hires from Apple.
Yeah, Apple's on a hiring spree. They're a big company. Obviously, they're hiring people all the time, but some pretty notable hires as of late. Robin Burrows, the former head of Xbox Live Marketing in Europe, Middle East, and Africa, so we had a big region, had joined Apple, according to his LinkedIn profile. Apple's not saying anything, but Burrows says he works there now. He worked at Xbox for 7 years. He was responsible for a lot of stuff, including the Xbox dashboard promotions, and then previously held positions at HMV. If you're not familiar with that, it's a UK-based music, film, and tech retail stores and site, and MSN. Okay, well, former Xbox PR manager Nick Grange joined Apple last year, but then so did former Nintendo PR manager Robert Saunders. Okay, so we got some retail hires, a couple PR hires. Earlier this week, Apple also announced John Browett, who was a former Dixon CEO, another UK-based tech retailer. He was also a former CEO of Tesco.com, is now Senior Vice President of Apple's global retail operations and responsible for the company's retail efforts worldwide. Obviously, Apple is currently in 11 international markets outside the U.S., so it's a big market. He will report directly to Apple CEO Tim Cook, who's apparently thrilled to have him along. Apple did have an announcement. They were the ones who announced that hire as well. Now, Browett is replacing Ron Johnson, who left Apple for JCPenney last year, but had worked very closely with Steve Jobs on store build-outs. Back in December, Apple was granted planning permission to build a new prototype Apple Store in Palo Alto, California. They already have an Apple Store in Palo Alto. This is going to be built only about a block away. And we don't exactly know what they want to do differently, but it is some sort of reimagining of the retail experience. Now, when I read all about these hires, and I read about the fact that Apple is not just thinking of building a new store, but actively working on construction not too far from where we are now, I think, what are they doing in the retail space here? And what does it have to do with games? Or are the two not related at all?
I mean, the retail store, if you think about the old videos where Steve Jobs is introducing the store and showing these boxes and boxes of software, which now seems really antiquated. Who has shelves and shelves of software?
I wouldn't be surprised if Palo Alto store has zero software in it. If that's like part of the, because obviously they're pushing the Mac App Store and the App Store itself. And there was talk for a little while that they might get rid of all software altogether, and they have it relegated to a very small section of the store. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if this prototype one, no software.
I mean, that's definitely a way to go. I mean, when they've replaced even like paper signs with iPads, I think they've been showing their hand a little bit where they're going. So the retail experience, it's kind of second to none at this point, where people go into the store, you're allowed to play with things. Nobody throws you out. You can basically do your work there if you wanted to. How many YouTube videos have you seen of like that dancing kid in the Apple Store? That's what he does, and apparently that works for him.
There are a few of those kids.
But onto this move with getting the Xbox Live marketing guy. I mean, Apple and social, not so great, right? They have Ping, doesn't seem to be getting as much ground as they would like. It looked like they wanted that deal with Facebook. That fell through a while ago. That probably would have helped them a whole lot. Does anybody think the having an Xbox Live marketing manager could help them actually crack this social aspect that they just don't seem to have?
Well, they have Game Center, obviously, which is part of iOS, which is their thing that's comparable to Xbox Live. They're nowhere near as good and nowhere near as used, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure that they're still thinking about ways to do that. I'm sure we'll see more about it probably in the next iOS version, because Apple has become such a big player in the gaming space now. I mean, as we're seeing the decline of things like Sony, as we talked about, and Nintendo now, and they took one of Nintendo's PR managers. A lot of people are playing games on iOS devices, and they do need to figure out a way to kind of merge that with the social elements that people like to do so much with not only Xbox, but with PlayStation and all the rest of them now. So it's probably related.
It doesn't sound like there's much of a secret here. I mean, they hired this man to do exactly what he did with Xbox, which is you had a competent gaming platform that became a social monster. And if you can do that, if you can take one thing that you're really good at or one thing that people go to a lot and you start introducing them to other things, you open up their avenue of discovery, that's when you get that social element. And I think that's something that's missing both from the iTunes store, from all of Apple's online presence, and from their retail stores. As you said, if you're thinking about a prototype store, well, what about a store that opens you up to actually engaging other people in the store? And not just focusing on the device that you want to buy, but focusing on what the device will do for you. That's something that Apple has been trying to do the last decade, but for any number of reasons, they've never really done successfully. Well, you've got a man who created something like that for Microsoft, which was a company that was inept at social before Xbox really started to take over.
The idea of not having any software at a retail store is interesting. It makes sense that Apple would do something that seems not too long ago to be a little bit crazy. How do you have a store with nothing in it? Especially since they just updated their Apple Store app, which is actually an app for iOS where you can go ahead and order things, pay for them, walk it to the store, and get your inventory. I think they have it's like a 12-minute window or something like that. Originally, it was a 12-minute window. So they're certainly trying to make the retail store experience as easy as possible. But at least right now, it seems like you've got a long way to go before you have nothing on the shelves at all.
There's the new plan. Nothing in the store. Just one guy.
You just go there.
It just works.
It's big, it's white, it's clean, it's beautiful.
You stand in line to stand in the space, and then you get to leave.
Oh, I would love to stay there if they would just put a coffee shop in an Apple store. I'd probably live there.
But you'd stain everything. Everything's light.
Yeah.
Unless they introduce white coffee.
Yeah. Clear coffee.
But it has to be blinding white. That blind, just walk in, it's like flares everywhere.
You can get black or white.
There you go.
And the white one is delicious.
There's choice.
Let's move on to AMD. Now, this is strange. AMD, they got a new CEO back in August, Rory Reid. And today, he told analysts AMD's getting into the tablet game. They want to compete with Intel. Here we go. Its first tablet chip is codenamed Hondo and will be a combination CPU and GPU, what AMD calls their APU. It's a 40-nanometer chip and is trying to be ultra-low-powered at 4.5 watts, which is pretty low. Their global business unit's general manager, Lisa Su, speaking at the company's Financial Analyst Day in Santa Clara, California, said, "We will see tablets with Windows 8 out there with AMD Silicon." And AMD is also targeting, this is just wild, x86 support at under 2 watts. Quote, "We can absolutely get x86 to less than 2 watts," Sue promised. So if you think about that, you can take full Windows 8 capability into an x86 processor in a tablet system that lasts for over 30 days battery life. That is very much within the realm of our capability, end quote. Now, notice she didn't say a time period. Nobody said that they could get 2 watts in like a week or two.
20 years.
Yeah, 20 years maybe. The thing is, Intel's been trying to deal with this for a long time, their power consumption issues. AMD deciding to do x86 for tablets instead of licensing ARM, I think is a mistake. Does anybody see AMD actually breaking into the tablet market with Windows 8?
No.
I would like to see it. I really would like to see it because, I mean, we all remember AMD pushing Intel to be the behemoth they are right now. I mean, Intel laid back on their laurels. AMD came in and really kicked their butt for a couple of years until Intel came up with a new architecture and really started pushing out the good stuff. But x86 architecture on a tablet at 2 watts, I mean, unless this thing is just a single transistor, I just don't see that. That being said, I hope they've got some secret sauce. I hope their guys have come up with something that's going to revolutionize the industry because that would be a revolution. 2 watts, x86, and it's not a dog?
Wait,
yeah,
they didn't say
30
it wasn't
days
a dog
of battery
either.
life.
Yeah, that's true. They didn't say it.
It could be the slowest processor ever. It's 100 megahertz.
I mean, their obvious play here would be, and there have been rumors of this of a long time, you know, that before Apple did the switch to Intel, you know, that they would maybe go to AMD, or even after they did the switch to Intel, that they would do AMD. You know, obviously they would want to go to the biggest tablet player here, Apple, right now, and try and make them use the chips. The problem is that it's too late. I mean, Apple's already doing their own stuff with ARM, so with the ARM chips, and I mean that's one of their bigger competitor right now in the space than Intel is. So they've got 2 things to worry about. Totally agree about, you know, like that AMD pushed Intel back in the day, but now it's the ARM chips that have been pushing Intel in the tablet space. So they don't really need that foil dynamic doesn't really exist in the same way. And AMD's just late to the game and trying to push their way into this.
Late to the game, but if Lisa Su, I mean, if she's, and we have no idea if this timetable is 20 years. But maybe it's end of the year. Hey, I mean, ARM will blow everybody away. But I hate quotes like this because it's like, it's a big tease. You have no dates. So I read this and I go, all right, so then show me the 2-watt x86 processor, or I don't want to hear it.
I mean, thinking this is really more about Microsoft, really. It's like, okay, if you want low-cost tablets out there, then run, because we were talking about this on Windows Weekly, nobody really knows what version of Windows 8 you're going to get on an ARM tablet. You don't know if there's going to be a desktop. You don't know if your applications will run in any kind of emulation layer. Probably wouldn't. So you're going to lose a bunch of compatibility that you had on x86. And to keep costs down, AMD may be able to do that because they are competition. Might not be as fast as Intel. Might not be able to compete on certain specs. But maybe at least Windows 8 will actually make inroads when it comes to being an actual tablet operating system.
But I mean, we've seen that before, reaching back into Vista, which they tried to put on a couple of tablet PCs. And it's just the x86 architecture doesn't lend itself well to the tablet format. And I'm not talking about interface here. I'm talking about just the fact that you're asking them to put a infinitely more complex processor, which is going to use up more power, into a device that already has a very limited supply. So again, this is something I don't see them doing really quickly. I want to be wrong. Like as Sarah said, I hope we get to the end of the year and AMD says, oh yeah, we came up with this processor. It only uses 1 watt. It'll run your tablet for a year. Oh, and by the way, it outperforms the A6.
We've figured out how to make tablets with no watts.
That's right.
They'll run forever.
It runs on hopes and dreams.
Just will it to sleep and awake.
On to the Facebook fallout. You know this was going to happen. We knew this was going to happen. That giant S1 is being torn apart. Facebook, if you missed yesterday somehow, Facebook filed for their IPO, and they filed their S1. And there's plenty of information out there that's getting dug up today, including Mark Zuckerberg going to China, but didn't bring Facebook with him, obviously. But this one is kind of interesting. Basically, Zuckerberg is a king. He serves as chairman and CEO, and he's granted the power to name his successor if he still controls the company when he dies. And the thing is, does he have control? Yeah, he's got crazy control. He's got 56.9% of voting power, which has some experts kind of concerned. Charles Elson, a University of Delaware corporate governance professor, said, the public has no say in the control of the board, which in my view is terribly harmful to any notion of accountability. It's very troubling to investors, and it's a bad bet for them. And that's the serious stuff. So we'll get to the sillier stuff in a second. But this does look pretty weird. So unless you have a tremendous amount of faith in Zuckerberg, maybe you don't want to invest with him.
Hey, Zuckerberg has done pretty well so far. I mean, don't people have faith in him at this point that he can build double his profits year after year? I mean, they have a pretty good track record. Yes, the company is still in its early stages as far as long-term companies go, but it's like this is somebody that I would trust with money more than a lot of other CEOs. I'll say that much. What's interesting to me is that if he can name his successor in the event that he is still CEO when he dies, who's his successor? Because he could die anytime. Like he has to already have named somebody. It's like a company
only
will.
He can name the successor?
I don't think it's only he. I think that's if he wants to, he can do it.
So if he dies, Facebook just
But
goes
if that's a clause, he's got to have somebody in mind already. I don't. Facebook is a very interesting company, and it's really unprecedented for somebody to have as much control as Zuckerberg has. But he built it that way. I mean, he's hired people to keep him in this position, and I don't know. I think if you want to buy into the company when they're at their high, I mean, arguably, I don't know how many more people on the earth are going to join Facebook. I mean, they're at some sort of
a
peak right now.
850 million people, and not that many more people are going to join until there's large swaths of China and Africa that don't have access, to be able to do it. But they're all about they have to optimize advertising revenue and figure out new ways to make money, and they have mobile payments, which are going to be potentially even more interesting than the ad revenue stuff. So there's a lot of ways they can do this. I view this Zuckerberg control thing as a total positive. Many people have said the same things throughout the years about Steve Jobs having so much control over Apple, and that, of course, ended up being a very good thing. Not to say that Zuckerberg is Steve Jobs at this point yet, but people who have the ultimate vision for where they want to take the company. And Zuckerberg has clearly had that for the past, it's been 8 years now. And he's done very well with that. And in the face of a lot of people yelling at him that he was doing the wrong things, the first 3 years, every other week there was a story that he needs to step down right now. And look at where he's taken the company from here. So, while these jokesters on Wall Street already, of course, are saying the things like, we don't trust that this kid will, have the have the right mentality to kind of take the company where it needs to go as a public company. I think that's a great thing that that he's going to remain in charge and be that much in charge. And it's going to be really exciting to watch when he has to release all these public numbers now on a quarterly basis. And Facebook is very secretive, not quite Apple level secretive, but almost that secretive, and how they kind of disclose what they're doing and what they're not doing. I don't know. I view this as a very good thing.
It's weird, though. This is the largest company I can remember doing an IPO where they weren't really public after the IPO, because since Zuckerberg has so much control, yeah, you're putting your money in Zuckerberg. It's not a traditional IPO in the sense of, well, you're creating a board that can hire and fire the CEO, that can push the company in a direction that they want. You're saying we're going to be able to invest our money with Zuckerberg. That's what this IPO is about. Now, traditional wisdom would tell you, no, you want accountability. You want a board. You want people with divergent ideas about where the company should go so that you get that sort of wider view of what you want. Exactly. But that traditional view is also what created the mess at HP.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So, I mean,
and the mess at mess at Sony. I mean, all these bureaucracies arise, and now we're starting to see this pushback against it because Apple was so successful and because Facebook is now the hottest IPO out there. And these are really kind of, dictator-like companies.
I think when some investors are looking at the fact when Google went public, they went and brought an adult in. They're like, Eric Schmidt, you will be in charge, and we will go into a lower level because we don't want to deal with that business aspect of it. So maybe people are just trying to learn from the past that way.
Yeah.
But definitely, I see your points are great here.
That situation was obviously a different situation, but it goes to what you're talking about with how much power he has. Facebook was set up in an ingenious way, and I'm sure Zuckerberg didn't even realize it at the time, but it was more people like Sean Parker who had been screwed over by investors before when he lost, previous companies and lost control and was forced out. So he came in and helped Zuckerberg know how to set up the company in a perfect way that he would be able to maintain this much control. No one has this much control of a company. Not even Bill Gates had this much control of a company when he was the dictator at Microsoft. So it's pretty incredible that he's able to do this. And, love it or hate it, that's the way it's going to be for the next the indefinite amount of time. And so that's going to stop anyone. They've tried to have people come in and be the parental supervision, and to some extent, you could say that Sheryl Sandberg fills that role to a certain degree, but it's never going to be anyone but Zuckerberg. They're not going to be able to oust him like that.
MG, you wrote a piece taking a look at Facebook numbers. Any of these things you want to actually highlight?
Yeah, the one thing, I can pull it up, but the one thing I remember off the top of my head is it's pretty crazy that Facebook already has, at the time they're going public, double the profits of what Amazon had last quarter. I mean, you think of Amazon, all they do is sell things. That's their job. They sell things, and they want to make as much money as possible. Now, they make a lot of revenue doing that, but they're not very profitable doing that. Facebook, which sells basically nothing besides farm goods on Zynga, via Zynga, who's responsible for a large amount of their revenue itself, which is interesting.
Yeah, it's like 12%.
Yeah. Facebook sells basically nothing, but they're making double the profit of a company like Amazon, which is an online retailer.
Well,
it's pretty incredible.
And just wait till they figure out how to sell via the mobile interfaces, which right now, I mean, I love the fact that there are no Facebook ads on Facebook for my iPhone or my iPad, just to name a couple mobile experiences, but they'll get in there eventually. The trick is, how does Facebook do that so that they don't lose any of their huge audience, which you could argue, although MySpace had a lot of other problems, was something that MySpace did wrong, where it just became too ugly and convoluted and people just went somewhere else.
And then there's this one story, the Google chef story, as it were, of the graffiti artist who put a mural on the wall of one of the first Facebook headquarters, David Cho. Apparently is going to be worth $200 million when Facebook starts trading publicly. So this is that feel-good story. So if you want,
the
make $200 million
guy.
bucks. That's all you have to do.
Well, this is, back in the day, they wanted to spice up what was probably a pretty drab office. They found this artist. They said, dude, can you paint the wall? We don't really have any money. Why don't we give you some Facebook stock? Hey, we're going to be big. We're a bunch of smart kids. We're hackers. We're engineers. And he probably went, yeah, okay. And who knows? I mean, he believed in the company or just said, it'd be fun to paint on a wall.
Oh, wait, I think Zuckerberg just earned some more money there. He's actually drawing some of the mural himself.
He should get a percentage of
That's
that.
right.
Yeah.
David Cho owes him money. That's too bad. That was worth $150 million.
It was a collaborative effort.
Or he painted over that entirely.
Apparently, this original mural has been split up into separate pieces and now is hanging in various Facebook
each piece
offices
is worth
all
$1
over the
million.
world.
So.
Yeah.
Right.
So I guess moral of the story, someday when someone doesn't have any money to pay you but wants to give you some of their stock, they may never make any money, but they might be the next Facebook too.
No, the moral of the story is that young people out there should be going and graffitiing everything they can possibly get their hands on, because you never know. You never
stock.
know.
What's
That's for
that?
stock. Oh,
Make sure
see, I
someone's giving you
forgot
some
that last part.
Wasn't there a similar story about William Shatner taking stock in what's it called? Priceline instead of getting actually paid for it, and it ended up being worth hundreds of millions of dollars, whereas he would have been paid hundreds of thousands of dollars, say, for those commercials.
I didn't
don't
see
know
the
if that's
commercial where he
urban
died.
legend.
Yeah, it's-
I'm sure it's on
Go
YouTube
Shatner.
somewhere.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the news fuse. This one's for you TV nerds like me. Vizio announced it would ship its 58-inch widescreen TV. That's a 21:9 aspect ratio in March for $3,500. Its official name is the Vizio Cinema Wide HD TV and will include Vizio apps, but not Google TV for whatever reason. But I don't think you'd care.
A lot of things don't include Google TV.
Well, some Vizio TVs do.
Yet.
That's the weird thing.
Yeah.
half of
50% of all
Vizio's TVs will have.
Hey, they still have a few months, you guys. Give them
there.
some time. Congratulations to Qualcomm and Ericsson for successfully handling the world's first voice handover between LTE and WCDMA. Great job! So what does it mean? Well, it demonstrates that users of LTE won't have voice calls dropped if they move from an LTE area to a non-LTE area. Currently, kind of a big issue. So if everything goes to plan, you won't notice a thing. You just go about your business.
VeriSign reported that it was hacked in 2010. The company didn't go into detail because the breaches were disclosed in an SEC filing. The hack happened sometime in 2010, but top management was not alerted until September 2011. VeriSign is the registry for .com, .net, and others. VeriSign said its executives, quote, do not believe these attacks breached the servers that support our domain name system network. Some scary stuff.
Apple has updated OS 10 Lion, and users are having issues downloading the update. Wah, wah. Apparently, a series of question mark images with the letters CUI are appearing on error messages. It replaces the default button images for those dialog boxes. The fix is downloading the 10.7.3 combo update, which is big. It's 1.2 gigabytes, but apparently fixes everything.
Google France is on the hook to pay a mapping company over $600,000 because Google France offered map APIs for free. Botan Cartographies, I'm sure I'm hacking that, a mapping company successfully argued to a French court that Google was guilty of unfair competition by offering map APIs for free. Botan charges for its data. Google is expected to appeal.
Botin Cartographe.
Thank you.
That's what I would say. I don't know either.
That's not what I said.
The NFL will officially stream the Super Bowl live online to the U.S., and the feds are busting illegal streaming sites like FirstRowSports.tv. This is the handiwork of the DOJ and ICE, but neither agency has officially made a statement. However, if you happen to accidentally come across these streaming sites, you'll be welcomed by the very familiar, this domain name has been seized by ICE.
Not ICE, but IDC released some new data that says Apple is now the world's third largest phone maker. LG was previously number 3. Nokia is still number 1 with 27%. Samsung, 23%. And Apple has 9%. The jump for Apple is attributed to, guess what? iPhone 4S. Nice going, IDC.
New York Times is reporting Tumblr is going to hire people to write things about the things that people write on Tumblr. Chris Moni, formerly Senior Vice President of Content at Black Book Media, is going to serve in the newly created role of Editor-in-Chief. He's joined by Jessica Bennett, who worked for Newsweek in the past. The two will cover the events in Tumblr and content written by Tumblr's users.
Google released an update to the Android version of Google Docs, improving the Docs experience on tablets, as well as including a handy feature that allows you to activate your Docs for offline reading. Yay. Editing your Docs while offline is still unsupported. Boo. Though Google has alluded to this feature appearing in the future. So good luck with that. On to the Randomizer.
Randomizer.
All right, this one won on title alone, and there's a video that goes with it. But here's the title from Geek.com. Edible super insulating foam protects hand from 7,000-degree welding torch. I don't think I need to explain that any further.
I hope it does, for all of our sake.
So here we have a video. A gentleman is putting his hands in some kind of goop. And let's see, he's going to place it on his hand.
That's the insulating foam.
That's the foam. And what's going to happen is he's going to Then not set fire.
So
to
that's
it.
the way you test this? That's
Yes.
You really
How many
hope this
failed
phone
tests were
works.
there?
Yeah, right. It's still kind of dropping off of his hand,
Yeah,
dripping
so-
off of the bottom of his hand.
I want to know what it tastes like. It's supposed to be edible,
It's
right?
edible. So yeah, that's the other thing. Now, I think I understand the idea. So like, let's say you're in a car accident. You want to make sure you're not getting any toxic things.
Oh,
Oh.
don't eat that.
It's wasabi.
Oh, it looks so bad.
Yeah, he drinks a lot of water after eating that.
It's delicious. Oh, God, I need more water.
Well, just because you can ingest something, that doesn't mean it's edible.
Right, that's true.
I've seen people eat razor blades. I don't know if it's a great idea. But, I mean, is this a feature people want in their insulation? MG, if you were building a house, would you be like, you know what, insulation should be green and I should be able to eat it?
and you eat it and put a blowtorch up to it when I just get angry.
It's
at night and
everything
have
you
my
ever
blowtorch.
wanted out of insulation.
I think it's less about eating and more about not, burning up.
And at the next famine, people will be eating insulation out of houses,
Hey.
edible and inedible.
It's-
This is a bad thing.
It may happen. Yeah. Wow. I'm trying to think of, I guess, a couch, cars, home insulation. Originally I'm looking at this, I'm like, what, are people going to paint themselves with this? And then, for NASCAR, if your car blows up or something.
So, like, it's a safe version of asbestos, is what you're saying. Because you can eat it. So why can't you wear it?
You can eat asbestos.
Hey, you just go ahead and weld away. I am covered. I've got edible super insulating foam all over me.
How about that calendar?
Okay. Avid Studio for iPad is live in the App Store for $4.99, which is the same price as iMovie. You have a worthy iMovie rival. And if you have access to the PC version of Avid Studio, you can export files from the iPad app. Pretty cool. Saturday is Facebook's 8th birthday, which is not bad for an $11 billion company. You're looking good, Facebook. A couple people actually reported that the 8th birthday was officially the date they filed for IPO. Not true. It's on the 4th. Sprint is getting an Android tablet, the ZTE Optic, 7-incher, $100, 2-year contract. Why is it $100? That sounds so cheap, you might say. Well, because it's running Honeycomb. And 1.2 gigahertz dual-core Snapdragon processor, gigabyte of RAM, 16 gigs of storage, available Sunday, February 5th at Sprint stores and at Sprint.com. And finally, we've got kind of a cool little I'll just tell you about it. Chattanooga, Tennessee. You might know that Chattanooga happens to have very, very fast internet, gigabit per second network in Chattanooga. They are sponsoring a summer program for students and entrepreneurs to give people the access to their network for development and testing, but also raise seed money, provide access to mentors, free room and board, and the opportunity to win some pretty big cash prizes, thousands of dollars, and seed capital. So if you're like, wow, this is me, or I know somebody who could really benefit from this, you can participate by tagging people on Twitter. The hashtag is GeekHunt, or by commenting on a video that geekhunt.com links to. It's a Facebook video, so if you comment on the Facebook video, then you can also be entered to win or enter a friend. So if that person applies, if you have a friend and they get accepted into the summer program and you're the first to tag them, then you get $1,000. So there's kind of an incentive to let Chattanooga know who's the next big entrepreneur, smart people. Application deadline is March 1st, so we wanted to tell you about it now. More info at thegeekhunt.com.
Very cool stuff. Let's check what's incoming.
Incoming message.
It's a message. You can send us an email at tnt@twit.tv or send us a voicemail at 260-TNT-SHOW, like Dan in San Antonio, who, like everyone this week, has been saying, what's a PC? What do you got, Dan?
Hi, this is Dan from San Antonio calling about the What's a PC. Listen, you can't, you had a caller call in today that said if you can develop apps on it, then it's a PC, and tablets aren't PCs because you can't develop apps. Well, there is an app in the Android market called Terminal IDE that lets you develop Java applets or applications for Android phones. So I agree a PC is traditional kind, but it's getting muddier as we go along. Anyway, thought you'd be interested. Bye-bye.
Well, I love it when voicemails start with "listen." You listen. You listen here.
I've been listening to you for 400 odd episodes. You listen to me.
Our turn to listen. That normally when I listen to voicemails, I'm not paying attention. So when
at least he didn't start his voicemail with "Look at me," because that would
have sucked.
No, that's not the only message we got about that. We got a lot of emails saying you can develop apps for iOS with, I think it's either Code A or Code A, however you want to say it. So, is it a PC if you can develop an app on it for it?
Well, yesterday Shannon Moore said, listen, it's a PC if I can build it. if I can get the parts together, and yes, I mean, that there are many really nice PCs right now. I mean, we're not going to build our own MacBook Airs, but if you can make something comparable, then that's what a PC is to her. So this still wouldn't be her definition of a PC. But hey, if your whole thing was you have to be able to develop apps to run on the operating system on that operating system, and you can develop apps on iOS or Android,
isn't it so weird how many conversations people have about this, like trying to argue back and forth whether X is a PC, whether a tablet is a PC, a smartphone is PC, these game consoles are PCs. It's just like, I mean, everyone is having this argument for no real apparent reason other than they want to be in some kind of camp for something, but. I mean,
I think it also it turns into like fanboy wars, because these sorts of arguments mean that when research companies say things like, wow, Apple was the biggest PC maker of 2011, other people who are maybe not so big on Apple say, well, that's not iPad isn't a PC, gosh darn it.
You should just measure it by like the amount of time you spend using any electronic device or something. You know, it's like these are all the same thing. They're basically all becoming the same thing. It's an
artificial construction. I mean, yeah, the only time you hear it is when another research group comes out and says, well, if you include tablets, Apple is the #1, or if you include this, Microsoft is. Who cares, honestly? You know, if you think it's a PC, it's a PC. And now let the flame war continue.
Yeah, there's some self-esteem stuff that just gets bundled in there. I don't know why. Email?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I condensed that one. That's why.
Oh, okay. Next email then from, who is it from? Ralph, a.k.a. Fox. Just to pick up on the randomizer discussion from TNT 428, here's a really simple way to easily distinguish left and right earbuds from each other. Tie a small knot in the cable of the right earbud, or hey, you could do the left. I don't mean to be all dogmatic about it. Thank you. As Southpaws, I appreciate that. This way you can tell at a glance, or even through touch, which earbud represents which channel. Is this simple enough? Suggestion to patent. Love the show. Keep up the great work. Ralph, I bet that this is a great solution for you, but I would never do this.
There's prior art.
No, I just.
Somebody else suggested
I'm not putting a knot in my earbuds.
Someone suggested nail polish because it'd give you like a surface that you can actually like feel a little raised bump or something like that.
But then, I guess clear nail polish wouldn't show anywhere.
And I'm sure there's some audiophiles in the chat room who will tell you that if you put a knot into the cord, you're doing something bad.
Yeah.
Especially if it's
It's gonna.
It's certainly not good for the
Something's gonna break, or you're gonna get bad quality. But I appreciate you trying to come up with solutions for us. Earphone weirdos.
Yeah, thanks for all the life hacks. There's plenty of them. Thank you so much for your suggestions. I want to put a quick note out there. MediaFly isn't doing the app for Twitch shows anymore on the Roku, so people are freaking out. They're like, oh, what's going on? What's going on? Are you losing your app? If you have a Roku and you have the MediaFly app already, just wait for an upgrade. It'll automatically, seamlessly move to our new application, which is coming soon. So if you have that application, it's not necessarily going away. It's going to be upgraded into a fully functional thing once again, so we're very happy about that. So hang tight. We know about we're quite aware. It wasn't like MediaFly put it on Twitter and we're like, oh no. Okay. By the way, we have a Reddit where you can submit and vote stories up or down. So if you're watching Tech News Today, you're like, I should go to technewstoday.reddit.com to submit all kinds of stories. If we shouldn't cover it, vote the story down. If we should cover it, vote it up. If it's not on the list, add it in. You can do that. It's all up to you. We look at this every day. It helps us out, determines all kinds of information that we might miss, and we really appreciate your input. I know we've got over 4,000 of you guys out there helping us out. I'm actively a Redditor, so I'm a big fan of that. Got to thank you guys for showing up. Thank you, MG and Father Robert.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
MG, where can people on the internet who are watching this find you on the internet?
On Twitter, Paris Lemon is his name. Facebook, same.
Hey, where'd that name Paris Lemon come from?
Oh.
Never mind.
Is there an FAQ about that?
I already know the answer. It's not even interesting.
It's not
on the FAQ?
It's not very good. Or just ParisLemon.com or TechCrunch or Pando Daily now I'm writing for.
How about you, Father Robert? Where can we find you?
Well, you got to drop by the Tech Stop at thetechstop.net, where you'll be able to find reviews of everything from enterprise hardware to this little cool S3 Ultrabook I'm playing with. And you also get to see what is probably the biggest geek family online. Everyone in my family contributes to the blog. I got Melanie Ballecer on the Apple Beat. I got Ryan and Megan Ballecer on Mommy Tech and Outdoor Tech. I have Saul Espino Ballecer who covers RF. I've got Dan Ballecer who covers the legal beat.
What is in your DNA?
It's weird. And then we've got Bill Schneiders who covers geek stuff from PAX. It's weird. But yeah, the TechStop.net. Or if you want to check out the Jesuit stuff, you got to go to www.jesuit.org and you'll see all the instructions we have for taking over the world, as Jesuits do.
Nicely.
We're the polite overlords.
So if you want to throw us some feedback, email us at tnt@twit.tv or leave us a voicemail at 260-TNT-SHOW. That's his local call somewhere, I think Ohio, I'm not sure. Or even send us a video message via YouTube. Please, no attachments. We haven't seen one of those in a long time. Tomorrow, Darren Kitchen and Steven Johnson joining us for Liquid Friday.
Woohoo! MG's like, I already had to wear a nap cap.